Hi, it's Lily, and I am back with another video. This one today is actually going to be focused on sexual assault. And I wanted to make a video about this topic because this is something that is so prevalent in the world that we live in today. And I care about social issues like that, and so I plan on making other videos on topics like this and topics on the problems that we face in this country and the world. And so this is the first of another video series I'm going to be doing on it, because I began researching this topic and I just uncovered so much more information than I intended, and I'm like, I can't put this all in one video. So this is going to be the first video that I make on this topic, and it is going to be on why people don't report sexual assault. And then I'm going to be making a couple other videos. One of them is going to be the psychological reasons behind why people will assault and rape other people, and then what can we do to change that, because this is very prevalent in our world, and it's pretty upsetting how it's not really taken as seriously in the criminal justice system as it could be. And so on this first video, that is what I'll be talking about, is why people don't report it. And it's most of this information is focused around women, because that's what a lot of the data is about. And there isn't as much data out there collected for men who get sexually assaulted. So I will be throwing in things like that as I talk about it, different facts about men or women. And I feel that the reasons why women don't report sexual assault can be similar to men. And so I will just be, talking about that as I go. I did want to highlight that I do, acknowledge and understand that women are not the only gender that gets raped and sexually assaulted. It's everybody. And it's just, I would say, talked about a little bit less for men, but I think it is changing a little bit to where people really do acknowledge it. And I think part of the reason why men don't want to talk about it is that they feel like that there is a greater amount of shame tied to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is say a few statistics about it that I'm going to read to you. Nearly 1 in 5 women have experienced completed or attempted rape during their lifetime. 1 in 3 female rape victims experienced it for the first time between 11 and 17 years old. 1 in 8 female rape victims reported that it occurred before age 10. It is more common for women to have experienced sexual assault or violence in their lifetime than it is not. And this is something that's obviously very upsetting to hear when you think about those statistics. And I feel like, honestly, it's probably a lot more than this, because there are so many people that don't report it. And it is hard to get a complete calculation of how much that actually is. It's something that has existed pretty much since the beginning of time, and it's very unfortunate, and it's unfortunate how far we have come as a society, and we are still having it to be this prevalent among our societies. Nearly 1 in 38 men have experienced completed or attempted rape during their lifetime. About 1 in 4 male rape victims experienced it for the first time between 11 and 17 years old. About 1 in 4 male rape victims reported that it occurred before age 10. And so it's not just women, but women are more likely to come forward. The NSVRC says that an estimated 63% of sexual assaults go unreported, but that number is hard to pinpoint. That's part of the reason I'm making this video, is to go over all of the reasons why people don't want to report it. And it really highlights the flaws in the system as to why people won't do it. So I do want to highlight that, obviously rape or sexual assault is really bad. It has really bad psychological effects on whoever it happens to. It can cause anxiety, depression, PTSD that can last your entire life. It creates problems forming relationships with other people. It creates problems across the board. It's just unfortunate that I have seen people try to defend this kind of thing, especially with children, and it's really sad to see that they try to use examples like, oh, well, people have been marrying children that were teenage brides for centuries. What's the problem with it? The problem is that it causes psychological damage, and it's unfortunate that people choose to overlook that, or they don't care. I really don't think it's a lot of people, but at the same time, I think there's a tendency with, I'm gonna say men, straight men, that they prefer younger women, and the younger women, they prefer teenagers sometimes. They prefer girls that are really young. You see it all the time where older men are dating really younger women. Obviously, younger women, there is an appeal for it, and it's sad because I think the line is really blurred. And I think now in society we are calling out people more for this predatory behavior. But if you go back even just to early 2000s and you see some of the things people would say online about young girls, about girls that are under 18, about teenagers, it's very disturbing. And I am glad that we are now calling that behavior out, and we're not really tolerating it anymore. And people are being held accountable and saying, like, if you are really old, if you're not within a couple years, it's not really good for you to be wanting to date a 17-year-old or whatever, 16. So on to some of the reasons why people won't report sexual assault. Now, right now in the criminal justice system, oftentimes if you accuse someone of rape or sexual assault, you will have to go through a dehumanizing and humiliating experience in the courtroom. Almost certainly. Because you have to tell your story, you have to talk to everyone, you have to say it in a room full of people. But more importantly is, if that other person has a lawyer, the lawyer will put you on the stand and question you and make it seem like you wanted it. They will gaslight you. They will try to manipulate you. They will make you, like, it's just heartbreaking that you've already gone through this traumatic experience, and then you have to sit in front of a room full of people and watch them try and convince someone else that you're lying or you don't know what you're talking about, or try to discredit you. And I think that is a very insensitive way to handle it. And I understand that's a lawyer's job. But you have to ask the question, is this morally right? Should we really be putting victims through this thing? Through this, it's like re-traumatizing them already. And that's a major reason why people do not want to report that. They don't want to go through that. And then at the end of all that, oftentimes the person doesn't even get convicted. The rapist, the perpetrator, doesn't even get convicted. They might even be convicted guilty and not even spend a day in jail. There are countless cases like that. It's just sad to see how judges treat it, because there are a lot of cases where judges will try to give the rapist the benefit of the doubt and be like, oh, well, probably won't do it again, or this, quote unquote. That's what they say about these criminals when they are sentencing them, and they'll give them probation. No jail time. They'll, and then they'll cut it short. It's always cutting it short. And you got to think, why are these judges giving deals like that? There was a case in Ireland that happened a few years ago. A man was acquitted from raping a woman because they held up her panties in court and said, this is obviously, she wanted this, obviously. Look at her panties. This is a lace front panties. She wouldn't have wanted that. Or she wouldn't have worn that unless she would have wanted something to happen. And that man was acquitted. He was found not guilty because of that. And you can bet that there was outrage over that, because that was humiliating for the victim. Not only did the rapist get off because of that, she had her underwear held up in court. Re-traumatizing. If she would have known that that's how it would have gone down, I'm not sure that she would have tried. Well, why? Nothing happened. And it's really devastating. The attorney literally said, quote unquote, You have to look at the way she was dressed. She was wearing a thong with a lace front. And this is routine victim blaming. This is what attorneys do that are trying to turn the story against the victim. And it's just really upsetting. It's even more upsetting because this attorney was actually a woman. And I just find it really hard that there are people involved in this criminal justice system that are so insensitive. And I think that that is a perfect example of the insensitives that happen when handling rape cases. And now that didn't happen in the United States, but you can best believe that that happened in tons of cases in the United States. And when things like that happen, sometimes most of the time people get outraged, but sometimes it doesn't really cause change. Another reason why people don't report their cases is because they don't actually understand what their options are when that happens. They're not really informed, and unless you go seek out this information, this is not something that is really taught. Some people don't understand that you can file a civil claim for damages done by this person if a criminal trial doesn't work out. You can file a civil suit for this, and a lot of people don't know that. So I feel like this is something that should be taught in public schools. This is information that should be taught to everybody so that they know if this happens. And I think that is also a big part in trying to change the system, is letting people know how the system works right now and how they can get justice. Like we talked about in the beginning, children get abused often. And I think that that is valuable information to be taught in school. Because I'm trying to think back now. I don't think I was ever taught about, like, rape or sexual assault, like, growing up. Like, we had, like, sex ed classes, but I don't think I was ever taught that. And it wasn't drilled into my head. And I feel like that is something that should be taught, that should be acknowledged, so that children and teenagers understand if this kind of thing happens to you, you can report it. You should report it. You should tell someone. What are your options afterwards? Even after a sexual assault, there are options to help you through it. A lot of people don't know that after an attack happens like that, or after you get assaulted, you can go to the hospital and they can perform a rape kit where they basically collect any evidence on your body. They take your clothes. They will take photographs if you have injuries. They will ask you questions, and they will compile a whole kit. And you don't have to immediately go to the police, but they will keep it. And so if you do decide to move forward with a lawsuit, then you have the option to do so. But if you don't do that, then there won't be as much evidence. And I don't think people realize either how much therapy really does help. Cognitive behavior therapy, when you've gone through anything traumatic, but especially assault, it really does help. I don't want to say it helps everybody, but they're able to get you to look at things a little bit differently. That is the cognitive behavior therapy. It changes how you're thinking about the situation. And the sooner you have that, the more easier it can be to recover from something like that. And especially children and teenagers who don't have a lot of life advice and don't exactly know how to handle what happened, it really can make the difference between having that significantly impact your life in a negative way. Another reason why people don't want to report it is because you have to tell someone really personal details about what happened. And like I said before, having to retell those details can be something that re-traumatizes you. And some people will suppress it. Sorry, fix my hair. Some people will suppress it, and for them to go back down and revisit that, it can be very traumatic. And some people would rather just not do that. It's hard to deal with. Another reason is that there is definitely a fear of not being believed. And I think that this is a major issue within society that stems so deep. That is the fear that you do open up, you do tell someone, you are honest about what happened, and they don't believe you. Or then you're in court and they try to call you a liar and they try to say, well, this or that. And it's such gaslighting. I feel like police officers, police officers do this sometimes, where they will manipulate the victim into signing a statement to say that they don't want to press charges or they don't understand what they're signing, and people will be manipulated. It's difficult. Many rapists walk free. Like I mentioned earlier, even if they're convicted, even if they're found guilty, they won't spend a day in jail, or they'll spend very minimal time in jail. They will have probation. A big problem in this country is that the rape kits I mentioned before, they don't get tested. A lot of them do not get tested. A lot of them sit in evidence rooms collecting dust, and they're not tested. I watched a TED Talk, and I believe it was in Chicago, that they had like 10,000 rape kits that weren't tested, and they finally tested them. And they were able to find like thousands of criminals and able to arrest them because they connected their DNA with evidence on there. And these cases were 10, 20, 30, 40 years old that they just sat in the evidence room and never tested. How many other victims out there did these people get to that could have been prevented if people did their job? And that's another heartbreaking fact about how the police, the justice system, handles these cases. And this typically happens because of budget cuts, but there are also a lot of issues, in that the police don't take these cases seriously. And sometimes someone will report a rape or sexual assault. Sometimes an investigator isn't even assigned to the case. Sometimes they're assigned to the case, but they never talk to the victim. Sometimes they talk to the victim, but they never talk to any suspects. Sometimes they never even try to collect evidence. And sometimes they destroy what little evidence they have. Because if there's no more room in the evidence room and they got a ton of rape kits, guess what they're going to do? They destroy them without ever testing them. The reason people aren't convicted is because the police mishandle the cases, because they don't take it seriously. Sometimes there's not enough people, but there's a lot of mishandling of these cases. According to a CNN investigation, 25 law enforcement agencies in 14 states were found to be destroying rape kits that could still be prosecuted. They said it's a routine process to make space in evidence rooms. So a proper investigation is never even done. That's a big reason why people do not want to report their cases. People don't want to report assaults. Why waste that time? Why go through all that? What's more unfortunate is rapists are oftentimes given lesser sentences if they know the victims. It's not taken as a serious crime, and like I said earlier, a lot of times suspects are not even questioned. They're not even interviewed. And it's sad. And it's crazy to think about this because we love to overpunish people who sell weed. We love to overpunish people, especially black people. It's just ridiculous. And this is something that was said in one of the articles I looked at. But back when white women were accusing black men, I should throw in falsely accusing black men of rape back during the civil rights movement, they were convicted. They were people killed. Like, there were so many cases where a white woman would claim that a black man raped her and they would kill him. Where's that energy for these white men? Sorry to say that, but not sorry actually. For these white men, because honestly, these are the people that are getting off on these cases. It's not just white men, but there is a pattern. White men across the board are given less sentences. White people in general are given less sentences on every crime. And this is no exception. Here we are in a society where we overpunish for things like that. And this is something that is always getting a slap on the wrist. What is also really upsetting to me is that people would rather believe, they think it's more believable that a woman will make up a scenario to try and get money to try and discredit a guy than that a man will attack a woman for fun or for his own pleasure. They would rather believe that she's lying than a man would do that. And I don't understand it. It's just, well, I do, but like, And what has resulted from this is a criminal justice system that has a bias towards rapists, towards criminals, and is always overlooking. It's not taken seriously. Literally, people who are convicted of selling weed or being caught with weed are given longer sentences than people who are rapists, and that's not justice. Another issue with this is there are inconsistencies across this whole country. There was a man in Montana who was convicted of raping his daughter, who got 60 days in jail. There was another case in California, Fresno, where a man was convicted of raping his daughter, got 1,500 years in jail, in prison. 1,503 years he was sentenced. What is that variation? Same country. Another reason why women or people will not want to report is fear of retaliation. This is if it involves a, say, former intimate partner, ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, or say it's with your employer. People fear that retaliation, and this is actually a big issue in the military, especially with women, where 62% of people who report sexual assault in the military receive retaliation as a result of that. And so people will keep quiet about assaults in order to avoid that retaliation. Sometimes the victim doesn't want the perpetrator to get in trouble with the law, especially if this is someone, maybe like the father of their children, or, you know, an ex-spouse. Sometimes they don't want them to get in trouble, which is a reason why people don't report. On a worst case, sometimes the person is abusing. So like, for example, if you're actually in a relationship with this person and they're abusing you and, you know, they rape you, they will be afraid to report that because they are so abusive. But if they report it and they don't get arrested and then they abuse you because you reported it, and they're scared. Sometimes the person who's abusing them is also financially supporting them. And this was something that was really prevalent decades ago, where, you know, before women could even have their own bank accounts, or they couldn't buy a home, they couldn't do anything without a husband. That was very prevalent, where women would stay married to people who were abusing them because they were financially supported. They didn't really have the option to leave. Obviously, if you report someone who's financially supporting you, if you report them to the police for raping you, you might not get the money anymore. I don't think this is as common now, but there's not really any way to tell. But sometimes a child will tell their parents that they are being abused and by the spouse or by someone else in the family, and basically the parent doesn't believe them or says they're lying. And I think that this was more common back a few generations, I would hope, but that was also an issue where they didn't want anyone to know. Like, there are things like that where people will hush that up, or people in a family know that someone abuses someone else in the family and no one says anything about it. And I think that is where it's important to have other sources in the world where children can turn to, because sometimes both the parents are abusive. Sometimes it's very hard for a child to be heard, and that's why it's important to have school counselors, to have teachers look for behavior. Instead of punishing a child that's acting out, you ask, why are they doing that? What's going on? Because most of the time when a child's acting out like that, there's some sort of problem. Not always sexual abuse, but there is a problem that needs to be addressed. The fear of being blamed is something that also holds people back, like we talked about earlier. There really are people out there who, and I'm heartbroken to see it still happen, because I thought, I don't know, I don't see it that much anymore, but I did see it the other day on like a news article that people still blame the victim. People still are like, well, what do you expect when you go out wearing that? And it's just, if people just took a second to critically think about that statement and to think like what? Like, she's asking to be raped because she wore a short dress. I only say she because I feel like that doesn't happen as much with men. It's not always, but women are definitely very over-sexualized. And so it's like, oh, I can't control myself because you're wearing a short dress. You're asking for it. You're like, literally critically think for just 2 seconds, and just people just stop before they reach that epiphany. They're like, no, obviously she deserves it. I just can't. It's not even about what you're wearing, but it's like, oh, well, you were drinking. And I've actually heard this, unfortunately, from my peers before, that if a girl goes out drinking and gets drunk and decides to have sex with someone, a guy or whatever, they don't see that as a possible sexual assault, rape. It as, oh, well, she was drunk and now she regrets it. It's like, well, if you're too intoxicated to consent, that is rape across the board. So it's just, but I've met so many people, unfortunately, that are my age that don't see it that way. And a lot of people, a lot of men especially, don't see it that way. That's why it's important to have a line. And like, you can't just go out to a club, to a bar, and get a drunk person to go home with you. Like, people do that, and it used to be more common, it used to be socially acceptable, and it's really not, because people aren't in their right state of mind to consent. You know, you don't know if that person's blacked out. You don't know what is going on, and it is taking advantage of them. I've heard this argument with, like, people say, oh, it's ruining the dating game because I can't go out and, you know, have a few drinks with people and, like, do that and move on. And that's not really what I'm saying. That's not really what the point is. You have to make sure the person you're getting involved with is okay with what's going on. If you know, like, if you already have an established sexual relationship with a person and you know that it's okay to go out and have drinks, and then that's different than you seeking out someone who's really drunk, or it's just different. It's weird to me that people get so upset about that. That people get so upset about wanting their partner to consent to what's going on, to be okay with what's going on. By having these standards in society that say, oh, you're asking for it if you're drinking or if you're dressed a certain way, some people do believe that. And a lot of victims will not come forward and report because they feel like it was their fault. I shouldn't have gone out by myself. I shouldn't have, which is sad. I shouldn't have gone on a walk by myself. I shouldn't have walked home from work by myself. I shouldn't have worn that short dress. This is the thing about the slut walk, I believe that's called, that people do. I want to say it's in New York. Could be wrong about that. Where people will basically get naked, or some of them don't even do that. But it's the point of that it doesn't matter what you're wearing, you're never asking for it. Like, I don't understand why this is such a problem for people to grasp. They're never asking to be raped. No one is ever asking to be raped. Like, can we just establish that? Like, again, this critical thinking block here that people just don't want to do because they don't, people dress comfortable, or they dress how they want because that's how they want to dress. It has nothing to do with unwanted sexual acts. If someone is intoxicated or under the influence of drugs or whatever, and you try to have sex with them or you try to do things, it is a crime to engage in that. No one ever asks to be sexually assaulted. It's not a thing. So that notion really needs to be put to rest. And additionally, for men and boys that are sexually assaulted, there is this powerlessness and humiliation that will carry with them for the rest of their life because of that. And it can have overwhelming psychological effects on how they act. It's just sad, and I think it goes with the whole toxic masculinity thing that we have going on in our society. People a lot of times do not want to believe the victim. And this happens a lot of times with famous people. And I know this is where it gets tricky, because there are people who are wrongly and falsely accused all the time who are famous. And that really does kind of ruin it for the rest of the victims who are sincere in what they're doing. That is kind of why we can't ultimately just believe everyone, because not everyone tells the truth. But most of people who report rape or sexual assault are not lying. Oftentimes, people aren't really believed unless there's like multiple victims. For example, Bill Cosby, he had 60 women come forward to say that he abused them in some way. Now he's out, right? Now he's out. Sometimes it takes a lot of people to step forward before they are believed. I understand that because he is famous. That's just another reason why women won't want to report, is that they feel like they won't be believed. There is a big feeling of guilt and shame that goes along with this, especially in some cultures. If you have sex or are raped before marriage, you are deemed like unworthy, you're deemed like really poorly. A lot of people feel like it's their fault, even though it's not. It is the rapist's fault. They did it. But even if you logically know that, you can still feel like it was your fault in some way, that maybe you should have done something differently. And that's a very dangerous mindset to have, where you blame yourself for the wrongdoings of others. I think that is a big mindset that we need to change in how we view rape in the world, especially in this country. You think about some cultures who they check your hymen to see if you're actually a virgin before you're married, and if you're not, then oh no, you can't get married. It's not even an accurate way to determine if someone's a virgin. There's no really way to see that, because the hymen breaks just living life. It's a silly, like, it's just ridiculous anyway. But there's always been this control over women's bodies, and that what they should and shouldn't do. And so it's just another way to put the blame on them, and just to have rapists not take responsibility. It's just sad. It highlights the idea that men can't control themselves, that women have to act a certain way to not get raped. They're not taking responsibility for their actions. And it's just that it's changing. The society, the United States has grown quite a bit, but there's still work to be done in the rest of the world. And another problem is some families have a very tough time discussing things like this. And certain cultures, it can be very difficult, and that's why, especially for teenagers or kids who get abused in some way, they won't tell their parents because it's tough. It's a tough conversation with the difference in culture, and they keep it to themselves because they'd rather deal with it themselves than tell their parents. Some teenagers in that situation will actually fear their parents punishing them and blame them, say, well, you shouldn't have been out, you shouldn't have worn this, and blame them for it, punish them for it. Some teenagers also don't want to tell people because they don't want to be socially outcasted from their friends at school, or just friends in general. It can be hard when you have a case where it is like a he said, she said type of argument, and there isn't evidence, or there is not a lot of evidence to determine if this was consensual, if it even happened. And that's where the cases really get difficult, is when someone says that something happened this way and the other person said, no, it happened this way. That's where it gets difficult, when it's not, like, because some people really don't see it as rape unless they were physically held down, unless there was a weapon, unless there was violence, unless they were fighting back. And that is also damaging. A lot of people feel like it's not really real. Like what we talked about earlier, if someone's intoxicated, some people feel like that doesn't mean rape. There's a lot of disagreement on what exactly qualifies as sexual assault and rape within society, I would say. The criminal justice system, it's a little more specific, but even the actual definition of sexual assault is a little vague. There was a Reddit post where people were collecting data, basically where people said, anonymously say if you have sexually assaulted or raped someone, and people took data from that thread because thousands of people responded. And of course, these are self-reports, so, they can only be so accurate. But a lot of men on there who reported that they had sexually assaulted or raped someone, and they had explained why they did it. Some people said that they did it. They did, like, have sex with someone without their consent or by force and all that, but they don't consider it rape. There's, like, a cognitive dissonance there where, yeah, I held them down, and yeah, they were unconscious. Yeah, they were too drunk to consent, but I didn't rape them. I'm not a rapist. And a lot of men feel like that they're not rapists, even though that they have raped people. People will really disagree about what qualifies as rape. It's like, oh, well, I didn't have a gun to their head, or, like, sometimes when a victim gets assaulted, they don't even realize that they've been assaulted. It's not like a clear, like, if they're with someone and they say no and they didn't want it, and then later they're thinking, like, it's something that people don't realize. Some people even suppress it for years. Like, if it happened when they were a child, they literally suppressed it, wiped it from their memory, and then they realized later on down the road that they suppress things like that. It's a defense mechanism of the brain because it's too much pain for someone to handle. That's why people also don't report, is because they don't even realize that they've been assaulted until later on. This is where the manipulation tactic comes in. If you coerce or manipulate someone to having sex with you, it is not consensual, it is rape. A lot of people are too scared to fight back because they fear for their life. They fear, they don't know. It's really sad that so many women would rather be raped and take the abuse than fight back because they don't know how a man's gonna act. I see a report every day that a woman just simply rejected to give a man a phone number, and he attacked her, he killed her. I saw a video the other day, a man shoved his, like, a grocery cart into the side of her car and dented it. Like, there's just, you don't know how a man is going to react. Some people may hear that and they're like, oh, that's just dramatic. And it's like, no, really, like, you really don't know the person on the other side of this. And so if they find themselves in a situation where they're doing things that they don't want to do, a lot of times women will just deal with it because they don't know how they won't respond. I think that's another conversation too, is men will be aggressive or assertive. If you tell them no, they might get mad. And it's a lot more common than you would think. Maybe. I don't know how common you think it is. Women are afraid to say no. Women are afraid to fight back. Women are always blamed for getting themselves in these situations. It can even happen where you were hanging out with a guy and you thought it was cool, you thought you were friends, and all of a sudden he does something weird, then raped you. It's just, that's why people are raped by people they know. Women will just be hanging out with someone and then it goes south. Like, not even sexually too, but like, it happens sometimes where you're on a date or you hang out with someone and then they get weird, they get aggressive, they get assertive, they get mad at you because you don't want to fuck them. It's just when you're in that situation, you are scared and you have to be really careful. You can't just get up and be like, well, I'm leaving, because you don't know how they're going to react. These are the things that go through a woman's head when she's going on a date, when she's going over someone's house that, maybe she doesn't know that well, or when she's going for a walk anywhere. These are the things that we all have in the back of our head, and it shouldn't be that way. Why do we feel so unsafe everywhere? It's because women are raped by people they know. They're sexually assaulted by everybody. People that you thought you could trust. And that's another disagreement is, people feel like if they're married or they're in a relationship that they can't rape their significant other. And that is also not true. No one is entitled to sex even if you're in a relationship. Sometimes women feel like what happened to them is too insignificant to report. And that's not true. That's always up to a lawyer to determine, because the lawyer knows so much more about the law than we do, and so people just assume, oh, well, he just groped me, why would I do that? He just did this, why would I report that? It won't go anywhere. Another issue is that many prosecutors will have a difficult time getting a conviction unless the victim has like physical injuries, or they didn't know that the person they raped, or even that they weren't dressed attractively. Basically, a woman who is dressed more, I'd say, provocatively is more likely to not be taken seriously during a rape case. And it's really unfortunate that that is still very prevalent. Sometimes women do actually report the incident and it's not taken seriously, like I talked about a little bit earlier. I think that this is more prevalent in college or schools, universities, where they don't want a high crime rate at their school, so they try to downplay it. And this is really bad, especially on a college campus, because then an abuser can abuse more victims, and there's so many more people in a concentrated area. And this is even more dangerous because this causes a chain reaction where people then don't want to report it because it's not going to go anywhere. And then more and more people get away with this kind of behavior. The legal definition of sexual assault is actually so restrictive that it doesn't really highlight the damages that it can do to someone in their life. Some people don't report because they fear too much time has passed. And again, that is not true. A lot of times that is a question for a lawyer. And especially because most governments recognize that it sometimes can take time for people to process what happened to them. And so, you know, if it happened 1, 2, 3, 10 years ago, it doesn't mean that they don't have a case. There is that side that some people do understand. It takes time to acknowledge these things. And this is really sad too, because some people use that as an argument against victims and think, well, if you waited this long to report it, you must be lying. Why would you wait so long? It's a very insensitive way to look at it. Sexual abuse and violence is a delicate situation. And like I said before, people sometimes suppress abuse for years and they don't realize it. And just because someone took a long time to come forward does not mean that they're lying. I think people need to keep that in mind. And it just breaks my heart that I see so many inconsiderate people in the world who do not take those things into consideration. They are just so quick to try and discredit people. And that is a big problem. And I plan on talking about why that's so dangerous in, one of my other videos, how honestly many victims, they just want to be listened to. They want to be taken seriously. They don't want to be called a liar. If you've ever been in a situation where someone has accused you of something and you didn't do it and they didn't believe you, it's very stressful. It could be as simple as like, oh, you told your mother I didn't do that, and you really didn't, break the vase or whatever. I didn't break the vase. And she's like, yeah, you did. And it's just, even if it's little things, it hurts. You try to not take it personally, but especially something like that, when you open up and you were vulnerable and you say that someone assaulted you or raped you and you are called a liar and you are not listened to and you are gaslighted, that makes the situation 1,000,000 times worse than if you just listened. According to RAINN, which is Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, out of every 1,000 rapes, only 6 rapists will ever spend a day in jail. And these statistics do not instill confidence in the justice system. Most abusers are known to the victim 60 to 80% of the time. Only 20 to 35% are strangers. A woman is 2 to 4 times more likely to be raped by someone she knows than by a stranger. And that is really heartbreaking, because you have people in your life and you think you can trust them and you have them around you, and it sucks when they take advantage of that. And that is when a lot of people may choose to blame themselves. They don't want to, but they end up blaming themselves. That maybe I missed something. Something I just thought of is like, there are so many guys out there that will literally just pretend to be your friend so you can fuck them, and if you don't, then they stop talking to you. Or if you get a boyfriend and then they don't talk to you anymore. And it's just so surprising to me. Like, I don't know why I'm surprised at this point, but that's what they were after. And they will pose as someone being your friend. Weird. Just weird. That's all I have to talk about for this video. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you listened to me this whole time. I would like to leave you with a TikTok video that I saw the other day. So, thank you for watching.
So this question, if you are physically able and willing, can you please stand if you know of someone who has experienced sexual assault whether it be a friend, a family member, coworker, or even yourself. Wow. Take a look around. Now, the second question I have for you. If you know that that person reported their assault, please stay standing. If to your knowledge they did not report their assault, you can please quietly sit down. Ooh. It's bringing tears to my eyes, y'all. Thank you. You take a seat.